Absolutely. It's you mentioned that what were you saying that Kentucky stayed Democratic at the state level until the early 2000s.
Hmm.
And I imagine what caused that shift was the presidency of Bill Clinton. Because Clinton, for those of you who don't remember, like Clinton was he was really preaching himself. Like, what do they call them? Blue dog Democrats back in the day, where they were still Democratic conservative voters, like Reagan Democrats, and Clinton was really popular amongst those folks until the incredibly successful campaign by Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich and the conservative movement of the '90s to just make. And this isn't coming from someone defending Bill Clinton. Fuck that guy. This is not that has nothing to do with it at all. But it's just uh, the the accusations against Clinton are the same ones they use against Obama or Biden or any Democrat since Jimmy Carter. That they're totalitarian fascists. They're here to de-Christianize the nation and to take away your family's rights and freedoms. And it worked. It's one of the most successful movements I've ever seen.
Absolutely, we're dealing with its effects today.
Yes.
You know, Rush Limbaugh created. I remember when that was a thing. I remember my dad coming home. I don't know, one day, early '90s, with a book that was written by Rush Limbaugh. Somebody at work gave me this to read, and I remember when Rush Limbaugh's television show, late night TV show, got put on our local ABC channel at like
Mm,
11 o'clock at night, and so he was like the very first person I feel like who made who took people and their political philosophy from being and what they consumed about the politics from being something that they heard on the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news to being this thing that they're constantly being bombarded with, like it's an all day thing
yeah.
that becomes this overwhelming presence in their life, and really feeds on. I mean, it really feeds on people's fears,
Yep.
uh, and you know, conservatives have a lot. Their whole ideology is based on fear of everything that they hold dear is something somebody wants to take away from them. So if you can just really plug into that and feed them constantly, I mean, Rush Limbaugh did that better than anybody. And
Rush Limbaugh, he was responsible for making the word liberal a bad word. It
yeah,
was like it was like he actually made it into an insult, and it still kind of works. And it's funny though that these days we use liberal as an insult, but the other way. Not that they're too far left, but they're not left enough. And I remember hearing people like during the Iraq War, like the early 2000s and everything, people would call into radio shows or something and talk, and it's like, well, your problem is that you're a liberal, and the guy says, well, I am. Aha, you admitted it, you're a liberal. Like they had got him in something. Like it was that big of a deal that it's actually it's impossible to underestimate, to overestimate how powerful Rush Limbaugh was in creating the culture that we have today. This culture of suspicion of institutions and anti-intellectualism and at least feigned obeisance to religious domination of the culture. It's funny because Rush Limbaugh wasn't like this actual super religious guy, but he had to pretend that this was a big deal, even though personally he didn't care.
right, yeah. And without Rush Limbaugh, there's no MAGA.
No,
Uh,
no.
MAGA could have been the early 2000s when Trump ran as a reform party or whatever, and but he made it nowhere because
Mhm.
that transformation of American conservatism had not come far enough along to allow for the electing of that type of person yet. People were still thinking at that moment, even conservatives, like, oh, this guy can't be president. But, you know, continue to progress it a few more years, and all of a sudden it's possible.
Yeah, it's the continuations of very easy to track. Without Rush, there's no Newt Gingrich. Without Newt Gingrich, there's no George W. Bush. Without George W. Bush, there's no Sarah Palin, and without Sarah Palin, there's no Donald Trump. Like it's very easy to track, and you can even throw a lot of other people in along the way because the Republican Party, at least in our lifetimes, has never been good. Let's not pretend. Which is why it annoys me when people say we need to return to the no, we don't. That party was bad too, but the party was at least a professional organization. You had politicians like George Bush Sr. or John McCain, like people who put a lot of value and importance on seeming like they're doing the right thing and following the rules. And eventually, it happened slowly. It didn't start with Sarah Palin. It started with people Mike Huckabee and people like Rick Santorum and Scott Walker, and it kind of evolved into like more and more inmates who ran the asylum. And then they start running for president, and then and more Clarence Thomas. They start getting elected to the
Yeah.
Supreme Court. And this is the thing. Speaking of Clarence Thomas with the Supreme Court, I always would make fun of Republicans, telling them that this crusade they're on to overturn Roe v. Wade was a fool's errand because the Republican Supreme Court would never be stupid enough to overturn Roe v. Wade. I always joked about that. They're going to use it as a way to raise funds and to scare you and to hype you up because they know if they overturned it, it'd be political poison. And they actually did it. I underestimated how many true believers they would put on the Supreme Court.
I think that for me was a watershed moment for realizing, holy crap, they're way more crazy than I
Yeah.
thought they. Because
Or dumber, at least dumber than I thought they were.
Months before that, when it was coming up, I was like, y'all, there is no way in hell that they're ever going to overturn this because they will lose this issue.
Yeah.
Like for 40 years, they've been able to ram this down people's throats and act like they're on the evangelical rights side. And at no point have they had to deliver anything to get those votes other than say it. And now I'm like, when that came down, I was like, oh my God, like I continue to feel as though that was still never supposed to happen. Like Mitch McConnell and the establishment lost control in such a way with that being that, like that was I still believe that was a huge mistake, and that there's still somebody who's probably supposed to end up in a body bag for allowing that.
Well, John Roberts didn't want it either. Like John Roberts is for lack of a better term, like he's the reasonable conservative justice, the Chief Justice Supreme Court, and he did not want this what was it, like the preliminary ruling they had for overturning it. He didn't want that to be public. Like he wanted to keep that under wraps and try to talk people out of it, but they released it anyway, so it made him play his hand there because he understood, because he's smart, that this is actually bad for us. And it is wild to see that they actually did it, because not even just from the political consequences of people having a backlash against it, but also because now they can't really raise money over it, because it was a great issue to rile up the base and have them donate a bunch of cash to wink and a nod, we're going to do it. But now they've lost that too. And so I was surprised to see that, but it's I shouldn't have been, because the crazies have been becoming more and more common. And now we'll get to that a little bit later. That's one of our topics of why the Republicans are so crazy. But I wanted to ask you personally. So you mentioned going to college and how that helped change your point of view. And this is something that is true, but conservatives look at it the wrong way. Conservatives are deeply anti-intellectual. They're always telling their kids, don't go to college. College is where they will brainwash you into being a Marxist, and there's these Marxist professors who are just waiting to turn you into this evil communist, which is insane. Because how many Marxist professors did you have in college? Can you count how many you had?
I mean, I went to Western Kentucky University. I'm fairly certain I didn't have a single Marxist professor. Now I had a freaking hardcore GOP professors, but
I mean, that's going to be common for most colleges, like no matter where it is. Like you might have one Marxist professor in 4 years, maybe. That's like, it's pretty rare that you actually run across one, or one that's openly Marxist. And they think that that's the setup, that college is just there to trick your kids into becoming more left wing. But that's not the reality. The reality is, like what you mentioned, first of all, you learn more. Yeah, and the more you learn, the less conservative you become. This is rock solid, airtight. It happens every single time, even amongst conservatives. The more educated conservatives are less conservative than the less educated ones because, when you learn more about reality and life and economics and science and politics and religion, you realize that the stuff that you were taught when you were 9 years old in your hometown isn't the reality of how the world works. And also, you get to meet other people from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. And there's no possible scenario in which you go into college conservative and leave more conservative. You always become more liberal no matter what.
Uh-huh. Yeah, for sure. I actually just today I don't know what your background is, or what people you are on your Facebook timeline, but
Hmm.
being from where I'm at, my Facebook timeline is MAGA.
Yeah.
Everybody, probably 8 out of 10 people are MAGA people. From people who I've known growing up, people who I deal with in everyday life, and there's this guy that I know, former military. I think he retired in E8, and he shared a meme today about, I forget what his name is. One of these Jewish rich people known throughout the world
Probably
who
a Rothschild or something.
that's yeah. And he's like, he shares a meme about how this guy is worth 500 trillion
I think I've seen that one.
dollars.
Yeah.
And he shared this today and says, "You people need to really educate yourself. This is who's running." And I'm like, see, this is why education is important.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
it doesn't take much education. Like, the fact that you can't see the number 500 trillion with a dollar sign on it and immediately know whatever the claim is false, even if it is like talking about an entire country, not just a person.
Right.
Or, I'm like, and this is from somebody who is railing all the time about our national debt that is what, 31, 34 trillion dollars
Mm.
at this that, oh God, we're never going to get out from under this national debt, and it's going to destroy our children forever. But you're saying there's a guy who has 500 trillion dollars, as if that's possible.
Is it, it's I this it's the gullibility that gets me. That's the thing gets me the most. And it's like you see something like that, and there's just no critical thought involved whatsoever. Like they see scary man has a lot of money, and now I'm afraid. I guarantee he didn't even think about the 500 trillion part. Like
Yeah,
he didn't start to consider, oh my God, does that much currency even exist on planet Earth? Yeah, let alone in the hands of one human being. And how is this human being not emperor of the planet with 500 trillion dollars? It's just, it's
I'm like, if there's somebody on this planet with 500 trillion dollars, make no mistake about it, we would invade that person. That we would seize all their money. We would write a check to pay off our national debt, and I mean, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff. Just the all right. Let's say you're not good with numbers. You're not good with math, which I'm not, but I'm good enough with numbers to know that 500 trillion is not a real number
yeah.
when it comes to money. But the ability to navigate information and understand how good a source
Yes.
is what the inability to do that is what makes MAGA possible.
Yes.
The people who, out of, let's say, out of Republicans in general, 60% of them, let's conservative numbers, 60% of them have fallen into the internet and they can't get out. Like, they are unable to decipher information, to be able to look. They're just like that. They'll share something, it becomes real to them, and the person who comes up to them in the comments and says, "Hey, do you realize you just shared a story from a website called conservativesarestupid.com, and as if this is like a real story. Like, this is the level of intellectual ability and critical thinking and processing of information that most of these people can do. They're just unable to
Yeah.
process anything.
60% is an awfully generous number. Like I'd say 80 easy. I mean, it's just like if you're still voting Republican at this point, you're probably MAGA. Like almost certainly. There's a tiny segment of Mitt Romney style Republicans, but those guys are dying off way quicker than the rabid just like foaming at the mouth QAnon folks, which has taken over the Republican Party, which is why it annoys me when, like I mentioned earlier, where people say we need to go to a pre-Trump. No, this is the Republican Party now. This is it. It's a bunch of conspiracy-addled morons who can't like their media literacy is bad. Like and it goes beyond just news media. It's like, so well, you remember Stephen Colbert's show, and Stephen Colbert, he had a whole bit where he pretended to be a conservative pundit and just overplayed the insanity of it. I knew conservatives who thought Stephen Colbert was an actual conservative. They couldn't tell that it was a joke. Like that's how bad it's gotten. And have you seen? I heard people I knew, so I knew it wasn't a bit. Like people who knew me said, "Oh yeah, Stephen Colbert is obviously a conservative." It's like, really? Wow. Or they can't tell a show like The Boys is clearly making fun of Donald Trump and MAGA. Like they can't tell, and it's wild. Like it's just wild to imagine that we're sharing the same universe because you see these interviews with these folks, and they'll say stuff like, well, Joe Biden's not the president. Donald Trump is still the president. Oh, so is inflation his fault? No, it's not his fault. And it's like there's no actual dot connecting that makes any sense, but they fall into wild conspiracies because they've been trained to do so. They've been told for 30, 40 years now that scientists are lying to you about evolution. They're lying to you about global warming. Doctors are lying to you, or psychologists are lying to you about, homosexuality or trans. Like every possible institution or people know what they're talking about. They're all lying to you because they hate God or something. So yeah, you're gonna stop believing in everything at that point.
But the billionaire from New York, he's telling you all the truth.
Yeah, that guy. That guy's got it. And that goes into their complaints about the elites, which crack me up. Like that guy you said he posted, there's a guy with $500 trillion. And it's funny because when it gets right down to it, conservatives complaining about elites doesn't actually refer to rich people. That's not what they mean. Like they don't mean rich people are elites. Like but Elon Musk,
All,
has
all the
billions of. Hmm?
all the time. I get called an elitist all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. So like Elon Musk with billions of dollars is not one of the elite. He's part of the common man, but the barista with green hair making $12 an hour, she's part of the elite. It's like they don't actually refer to financial elites, they refer to cultural elites. Like, and cultural elitism is just, people who say, well, racism is bad and maybe we shouldn't be mean to queer folks. That's elitism in their mind.